Hey everyone, today's lesson is going to be over types of succession. And so our learning objective is we're going to describe how events and processes that occur during ecological succession can change both populations and species diversity. So we're going to first start with the types of succession. So the first type of succession that we have is called primary succession. Now, it makes sense because primary means that it's first. So this is what's first happening or the beginning steps of succession following an extreme disturbance. So if you have something like a volcanic activity or a glacier that rips up a lot of the organisms and life that is within a certain area, immediately after that happens, the primary succession is going to start happening. Those first things that happen right after whatever disturbance that we're looking at. So these environments that are in primary succession are typically lacking in soil or nutrients. So, for example, if I have a volcanic activity or something that occurs, let's say out in Hawaii, as the volcano erupts and the lava is flowing everywhere, it is going to kill off every living thing really in its path. And that leaves little soil or nutrients to be able to start growing and sustaining other life. Following primary succession, though, and there's also very low species diversity. So that means that we don't have a whole lot of life due to the fact that there's not a lot of soil, plants, or anything else to sustain much life. So following primary succession, we then have secondary succession. So this follows and includes the time period in which plants and animals start to begin to inhabit an area. So if we look at this picture over here, you can see this is where we're starting. So you have this really big forest, and let's just say in this case, the disturbance was that there was some sort of fire that wiped out a lot of things. Well, after that fire, that's going to really leave not a whole lot of living things left. It's going to kill off just about everything. So right here, we have your primary succession. These first couple species are going to start to show up. And you'll notice that as we get further and further along, you get the soil starts to be better and gets deeper, but also the species that are showing up are going to start getting taller and more complex because with little soil, then that means that can only sustain a small number of organisms or only certain organisms. Okay. If you only have a thin layer of soil, you cannot support really tall, big old trees. So, a pioneer species is just the organisms that first inhabit a disturbed environment. So, some of the examples that we have for primary succession, the pioneer species are normally lichens and mosses. So, lichen is just a combination of algae and fungi living together. And then we also have mosses. So, the purpose of these is they start to break down the rocks that are present in order to create fertile soil. So, soil actually comes from rocks. So, these organisms start to break down those rocks in order to be able to have soil so that other succession can happen following. So this is what lichens and moss look like. So lichens look like this on trees. So this is that combination of algae and fungi, and these are our mosses. And then secondary succession pioneer species are things like grasses. So grasses are normally going to be the first things that show up in secondary. As you get further along, then you're going to start seeing shrubs, and then a little bit shorter trees, and then taller trees. So as you go, the more complex and large that these organisms are, the further on in secondary succession that you are going to find them. So what happens to the dynamics of an ecosystem succession? So, like I mentioned before, species diversity is very, very low early on because there's not a whole lot of soil and everything's been killed off. That means we don't have a whole lot of species. But as succession has more time, that species diversity is going to increase. So, if we look at this graph right here, you can see this down here would kind of be whenever that disruption took place. In this case, we're looking at when Mount St. Helens erupted, which is a volcano. So the species diversity is very low right afterwards. But as time, which is this x-axis, as time goes, the species diversity is going to start to increase because that soil is increasing, leading to a greater number of species that can actually live there due to plants being present as well. And then the other thing we look at is biomass production. So biomass is just the total mass of anything living, right? Bio means life. Mass is just having to do with the amount of something. So we're looking at the amount of life production is low early on. So this also is going to increase as succession has had more time. So right away, there is not a whole lot of living biomass. Everything's been killed off. But as we go through time, which is this x-axis again, you see that the biomass starts to go up. You're starting with these pioneer species down here. It goes up, and eventually it's just going to kind of reach a pretty even, steady state right here, which means it's not going to increase or decrease a whole lot. But it will start off low and then increase and then just kind of be a little bit more stable from there on out. So that's all that I have for you for this lesson. So go explore further.